Welcome to Elevate Your Ride, the podcast dedicated to elevating your performance in the saddle. I'm Ellie, your personal trainer.
And I'm Lauren, your mindset coach.
So, recently we've talked about why it's important to warm up your mind and your body before a ride. Today, we're going to talk about why it's important to be mindful during your ride itself. Lauren, can you walk me through your mental process during a ride?
Yes, absolutely. So we'll take today's ride, for example. I went out to the barn and pulled Dixie out. She hasn't been ridden for a couple days because we had the little ice storm here in Oklahoma. So everything was pretty shut down. So I knew that going into it. I did my pre ride mental warm up where I visualized how I wanted our ride to go. I had my goals for the day. And now I'm at the barn pulling her out and putting all of that into reality. So, like I said, I had my goals for the day. I knew that she was going to be fresh because she's been in the stall for a few days. I mean, she's walked a little bit, but she hasn't gotten out. She hasn't gotten to play, gotten to buck. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to assess her eyes. I'm going to say, okay, how are you reacting to me? Do you look extra bright? Do you look kind of quiet? Are you bored? What's going on here? So mentally, I'm taking notes of her emotions so that way I can balance them with my own emotions. So when I pulled her out today, she was looking pretty bright. She was going kind of from horse to horse, strutting her stuff. And so I said, okay, you're going to need a lunge. So I mentally accounted for that amount of time that I needed to give her to lunge. So that way I wouldn't be rushed. Because one of the biggest things I found is if I feel rushed during a ride, I am not very productive with my horse. So once I saddled her up and was ready to put her on the lunge line, I made sure that I was 100% present because one thing I've also realized is that horses know when you're not paying attention. So, Dixie, if she knows I'm not paying attention, she might pull on that lunge line a little bit harder than if she knows I'm right there with her. So, I'm watching her. I'm watching the way that she moves. I'm again watching her eyes just to see how her energy level is decreasing and making sure that while it's important for me to be mentally focused, it's just as important for her to be mentally focused. So I watched that until I felt like she was pretty quiet. She did need to run and buck a little bit. So that was definitely a good choice on my end to be able to do that. I spoke with my trainer before we got on and I asked him which bridle he thought would be good for her because since she has had time off, that's going to play a big role in how she's going to react and respond. So then when it was time to get on, I did some breathing, deep breathing to try to center myself and get relaxed. I eased into the saddle. And again, once I got into the saddle, I did my breaths because I think it's just really important to refocus yourself onto your horse and into your ride so that way you are present. You're going to hear me say being present so many times during this episode because it is the most important thing. And I think that's why sometimes they will say meditation practices are really good because you're teaching your mind to come back to you when it wanders. So, riding horses, your mind will begin to wander. And it's about bringing yourself back to the present, which is with your horse right then, right there, feeling each stride, feeling the pressure in your reins, feeling how they're reacting, and having a plan for what you're wanting them to do. So once I got on Dixie, we did our warm up because just as important it is for us as equestrians to warm up, she needs to warm up too, even though she got to run and play on the lunge line. But now we need to get her dialed in for her workout. So we took kind of a slower approach, did a lot of trotting, balancing. I was thinking to myself, not only be present, but be balanced. Like Ellie talks about having that core stability. I'm really focused on my core stability with her matching her strides. So just trying to become one with my horse. I went through my warm up with her and then I figured since she had a lot of energy, let's go ahead and get to loping. Let's gallop, do some gallop counter canters. And if she was feeling like she wasn't going to be too fresh, I was going to try lead changes. But if she was really fresh, I was going to work on gallop, slow down, body control. So, like we had talked about before, it's great to have a goal, but also let that goal be flexible depending on how your horse is doing. So, my number one goal was to be able to try to do some lead changes. And my backup goal was do gallops and slowdowns. So, those were kind of like the main things I was wanting to accomplish during the ride. So, I was counter cantering her at the gallop. She was feeling pretty balanced, not quite as balanced as she is when I've been riding her consistently, but for as many days as she had off, I was feeling very confident and excited about the way that she was riding and presenting herself. So I went ahead and tried for some lead changes. She's very green at them and she's been making a ton of progress, which is great, but they're not finished by any means. So I knew that in my goals of doing the lead changes, my expectation for quality wasn't going to be like if I was riding a 10-year-old horse that's been finished forever. So again, have goals, have backup goals, but also be realistic in all of that, right? So don't have a goal of getting a plus 1.5, he's a radical zip lead change when your horse has only been changing leads for a few months, because that'll just set you up for failure. So we went through that. We did our lead changes. I was really happy with the way that she did them. I was happy with the way that she handled herself afterwards. I made sure going up to these lead changes that I was really balanced and centered and focused in both my breathing and my body. So that way I would not give her any extra anxiety with my anxiety. So we went through that. That went really well. My trainer was out there riding. So I made sure to ask him what he thought, made sure to check in and ensure that we are on the right track. And then once we did that one direction, we went the other direction. She felt really good. Again, tried more lead changes. I was happy with her. And once I felt that I had accomplished my goal, then I began cool down mode, which was ease her body down, ease my mind down. I'm still not going to let out all the way because, especially like I said, she hasn't been ridden for a few days. She's still fresh. There was ice on the covered arena roof that was sliding off. There's horses that are turned out normally, but now they're inside, so they're kinda running around and everything, so you can never completely just relax, but I wanted her to know that she did what I wanted, and so she was getting the release, and we cooled down, and I got off, and I was happy with the day.
So, you talked about presence a little bit, but let's dive into that a little bit more. How can you refocus yourself when you get distracted? Like when you said when you first hopped on, you needed to be present on your horse, but when you get on, there's usually a lot of distractions like the ice falling off the roof or the horses running around or your trainer or other people riding around. How do you recenter yourself to focus on being in the present moment?
Yeah, absolutely. So it is easy to get distracted, especially when you first get on because you're excited, you're happy to be on your horse, you're usually with your friends. But that is probably one of the most important times to recenter yourself, regain focus, and say, nope, I am here for a purpose. I am going to be calm. My horse needs me to be centered and present with them in order to accomplish our goals. So, what you need to do is, like I said, the breathing exercises. This is a great place to do it of when you first get on. You don't need to necessarily go all the way through the box breathing like we talked about before, but if you can do the diaphragmatic breathing where you breathe in through your nose, really fill your diaphragm and push down through your belly through that breath, and then breathe out slowly through your mouth, that's really going to help center you. Also focus on your other senses. So actually look at your horse. I know a lot of times our trainers say, stop looking at your horse. But when you first get on, look at your horse and say, okay, yeah, I'm on my horse. This is where I'm at. I want you to really feel the reins. Be 100% present with that feeling of the reins in your hands. Maybe pick up and feel the pressure change in your hand. Think about how the reins feel. Feel the leather. Are they cold? Are they warm? How do the reins feel in your hand? Then think about your saddle. Think about the way the seat feels. Think about your actual seat bones in that. Do you feel pressure more on your left side or your right side? Are you sitting balanced? Focus on those things. Feel your horse underneath you. Feel, has your horse taken a deep breath? Have I taken a deep breath? That's also another big thing is when you can feel your horse take a breath underneath you, that shows that they're relaxing as well. So that's something that I always try to achieve in the middle of my rides is when I come down to either a walk or a stop, I want my horse to take a breath because if they're taking a breath and they're relaxing, and I try to take a breath with them as well. But going back to when you first get on and being present, it's just about feeling everything in that moment and saying, okay, I'm here with my horse and I'm ready to go.
So it sounds like Dixie was a pretty good girl for your ride back, but in that sort of instance where you know that your horse might be a little bit spooky or they might be a little bit extra fresh, how do you keep yourself from becoming anxious and saying, oh, there's a horse running around on the lunge line. They might spook and that might cause my horse to spook. Or I'm going past the scary end. I can feel myself getting balled up. How can you keep yourself calm and recenter your mind in those situations?
Yeah, keeping yourself calm in those situations is going to be key to having a successful ride. And that's something that all of us struggle with. Even the most advanced riders are going to feel, oh no, I know that that's a scary point, or I know that this isn't going to be the best ride. Just like when I got on today and I knew that the ice was going to be falling off the roof and making all these noises and the horses were running around. The biggest thing that I do for myself and for my horse is to have a plan, and that comes back to our pre ride routine of having a plan because horses are herd animals and they're looking for that leader. So you need to be the leader for your horse, especially in scary moments. So if you have a plan and if you're confident in how you want to execute that plan, your horse is going to be more likely to trust you. Also, if it's super scary, definitely have a talk with your trainer so that way they're on board with the plan that you have and they can give you advice and tell you, okay, do this with your horse, do that with your horse. But mentally, what you need to do as a rider is have confidence, use the fake it till you make it method, and be the leader for your horse in those moments.
Does smiling play a role in that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Man, you will see me smiling all the time, and you think I'm really happy. And generally, I am. But a lot of times, I'm just smiling because if I smile, it's going to internally make my subconscious be happier and more relaxed and more positive about how the outcome will be. And by smiling, you could definitely trick your brain into thinking that everything's okay. There is the placebo effect when it comes to smiling for sure.
Is that why you're always smiling so much when you're showing?
Yeah, exactly. And also, I just really like smiling. It's my favorite.
Well, maybe you can teach me how to be better because I look at all my show photos and all my show videos and I have like the worst scowl on my face.
No.
So we need to work on that for me.
So I'm not gonna lie, I will practice smiling even when I'm working out because I do it when something's really difficult. And I figure working out is a great opportunity for me to practice smiling through pain and difficult situations. So maybe you should smile during your workouts.
Maybe. We'll see. I do try and smile when I'm practicing patterns. So when I'm practicing like the showmanship or the horsemanship, things like that. Because where my scowl comes from is when I'm really focused. And those are the events that I focus the most in. So if I can make myself smile during the showmanship and the horsemanship practices at home, I find that it does make it easier for me to smile in the show pen.
Definitely. And when you're doing your visualizations, make sure that when you look at yourself, you're smiling.
Do you visualize yourself during your ride or do you just do that before?
Yeah, I will visualize myself during my ride. It's not quite as detailed as in the pre ride routine, but I will visualize what the next 3 or 4 strides are going to look like. Or let's say I want to change leads at a certain point of the arena, since that's what I was working on today. I would visualize, like, okay, it needs to feel like this, it needs to feel like this, and this is what I'm going to do. I think about where I want her body and how I want her responding. And since I was just practicing, if it didn't feel right, I would abort mission and go around again until the actual moment resembled my visualization. And then that's also some good feedback loop because if what I visualized her feeling did not produce a good change, then I would change my visualization for the next time and say, okay, her shoulder needs to be an inch more to the left, or I need to be sitting 2 pounds harder on the right. Those are kind of the things I will think about and visualize for the regular routine practice.
So during the lead changes, for example, I tend to get really tense in the 3 or 4 strides before the lead change itself. What can I do in that moment to help relax my mind and relax my body?
Yeah, so I get nervous before lead changes too, and I've gotten a lot better than I used to, but it's still really difficult for me. I think the more times you do something, the more confidence you're going to have and the less anxious you're going to feel. But that is definitely something that I'm focused on. So in my visualization, I will actually think about the way that I'm going to feel. And I do employ my breathing exercises while I am riding. So I will do the diaphragmatic breathing. I will make sure that I'm taking slow breaths and not allowing myself to breathe quickly and up in my chest because that will make me more anxious. I try also to think about being loose in my body, not necessarily like flopping around like a sack of potatoes, but I will allow myself to move with my horse and not get stiff. Because when I get
Right, and be fluid.
yes, exactly. Yeah, be fluid with her. So I'll work on my breathing, I'll work on my fluidity, and that really helps take a lot of the anxiety away.
Do you find that you get more tense before or after your lead change?
Personally, before. So I get nervous probably 4 strides out. I'm like, "Okay, 1, 2, 3, change." And so I've tried to kind of remove myself from that process because while that was great for learning, now I almost get nervous just starting to count. So I'll just think about how she feels with my visualization and my breathing, and when it's just right, we just do it rather than me necessarily counting and saying, "Okay, it has to happen now." So, while it does have to happen, quote unquote, now in the show pen, in practice for building both my confidence and her confidence, I give myself some grace on when and where it has to happen.
Let's talk about after the lead change. So, a lot of people will, get really, really anxious right up to the lead change, and then the lead change happens, and then it's like this big sigh of relief, and you can see the rider mentally and physically disengage, and it's almost like a reset. And then the horse will fall in, or the horse will fall out, and then the maneuver after the lead change tends to not be very good. So, how can you avoid yourself from falling into that where you lose your entire mental focus right after that?
Yeah, that's a really good point, and I did used to have that issue as well, but now what I do is I tell myself, finish strong," and the same can be said for trail, right? Like, how many times have you gone through an obstacle that's extremely difficult, and then you get through it, and the very last pole, you knocked out because you quit riding, right? And your trainer probably tells you, "Finish it, ride all the way through," but a big thing is, like we talked about, where you remain present. You have to have extreme discipline in yourself to say, this maneuver is not over until X amount of strides after. And that's something you can talk about with your trainer as to when they feel you can let down and relax versus having to be completely on. But you're probably gonna need to stay present with your horse for several strides after each of these big maneuvers. So a big thing is, yes, give yourself a little pat on the back for accomplishing either a lead change or the trail go over, but stay riding with your horse, stay present because if you relax, they're going to relax and drop their back and you're going to get sloppy. So stay strong, be very conscious of your core stability and your breathing and just be there mentally.
What event do you have the hardest time staying mentally focused for?
Ooh, probably the trail. Um, the trail, there's just so much, right? There's a lot of obstacles, and each obstacle is made up of 6 to 8 poles, right? And so not only do you need to have the mental focus to get up to the obstacle, you have to have the mental focus to stay within the obstacle, the mental focus to get out of the obstacle. And the thing about trail is you don't have to be perfect to win, but it's really easy to have a little mess up and then completely give up. And so that's the biggest thing about trail. I heard from a cutting horse trainer, have a high bounce back percentage. So by that, he means that you're guaranteed to shank a shot at some point. You're going to do one of your maneuvers completely out of left field. It's not going to go well, but how quickly you get back on track will determine your success. And that can be said for all of your classes. You have one bad class, well, let's get back on track and make the next class your best class. Just because you have one bad maneuver, one bad class, does not mean it's got to be a bad day or a bad show. Really focus on coming back to the present, being with your horse, being in the moment, and saying, just because I messed up on one thing does not mean it's over or the end of the world. But that's why trail is really hard for me because I'll be feeling like on top of the world because I just did a really great maneuver and then the next one I hit 4 poles. But it's a matter of just getting back on track and saying, "You know what? I'm gonna finish strong." How about you? What's the most difficult class for you to stay present in?
So, funny enough, trail is probably actually one of the easier ones for me
Really?
because in the trail, you can't allow to turn your brain off. Like, there's not a moment where you're not changing direction or you're not going over a pole or you're not changing gait, right? You always have to be right on the money for the trail. And in some of the other classes, there's a little bit more downtime. Like, for me, mentally, the pleasure is the hardest class because you're just kinda loping down the rail, like, my mind starts to wander, I start looking at the crowd, I start getting busy with myself. In those high intense classes, I do better because my mind can't wander. There's no room for it. So, I haven't shown the Western riding in a long time, but when I did show it, that class also, like, there's a little bit of time to wander, right? Like, in between the lead changes, especially when you're doing the center changes, there's a little bit of time to be like, "Oh, what's that person doing in the stand?" You know what I mean? So, for me, my brain has to be kept busy the whole time.
That's a really good point, and both of those classes that you mentioned about being stressful, both Western pleasure and Western riding, I actually don't show in. So, that's a really good
Yeah,
point as to probably and I'm sure that's probably part of the reason I don't show in them is because there's not enough going on. But
right?
how do you then keep yourself focused in those classes since I don't show in them?
Well, I'm not very good at those classes. The showmanship and the horsemanship, like, those are my events, and
Mhm.
then my 3rd best is probably the trail, and then I'm actually stronger in the hunter than I am in the pleasure. The pleasure is my worst class. I am not good at it, and honestly, mentally and physically, it's the hardest class for me. I wanna prepare too much. I wanna do too much. I have a really
Mhm.
hard time just sitting and being present and being focused in the pleasure pen itself. And maybe it's because I have underlying anxiety about the pleasure because I'm not very physically strong with the pleasure. It's just not a class that I've ever really been able to do very well. So I've been practicing it a lot more at home, trying to get over my pleasure anxiety. I actually showed the pleasure for the first time in a couple years earlier this year. And so it's this horse named Minnie. One of the owners in our barn was kind enough to let me show her this October, and Minnie's a fairly accomplished pleasure horse. So this trainer named Kip Larson trained her, and, he had her for a long time, and he was watching me ride around, and he was like, "You just have to sit there. Like, you don't have to do much, like, she can do it." And I'm like, "Yeah, like, that's easy for you to say, like, I can't do that." Like, that's really, really hard for me. So, what I used to do, I used to have a little bit more of the fixed mindset, and I used to say,
Mhm.
"Okay, well, I'm not very good at the pleasure, so I'm just not gonna practice it. Like, I'm gonna practice the horsemanship and the showmanship, and I wanna get better at the things I'm already good at." And then I realized that I needed to have a little bit more of a growth mindset. So, for the past year or so, I had actually changed my mindset and started to look at my writing a little bit differently and said, "You know what? No, like, I'm gonna focus more on the things that scare me, and I'm gonna focus more on the things that I have a hard time with." And I'm actually seeing it improve my horsemanship and my showmanship because I'm going out and I'm trying things that are hard for me, and it's making me a better rider.
Good for you. I'm really proud of you, and I'm proud of you for having that growth mindset because that's gonna make all the difference in the world for your riding and for your future.
Where do you need to have more of a growth mindset in your own riding?
Ugh, definitely listening to you talk about how you're doing the hard things and practicing the pleasure and practicing the Western riding, that's absolutely where I need to also venture into the growth mindset, which, funny enough, the past week or well, before the cold snap, we did kind of dive into the Western pleasure with Dixie. And
Yeah, I saw your videos on Facebook. I was like, "Good for you guys."
thank you. Yeah, it's definitely not my passion, but I liked it. I had a good time. I think my horse actually liked it too because it was something different. And like you said, by trying something that maybe we aren't necessarily quote unquote good at, it really allowed me to explore different ways of riding her, different ways of using my legs, different ways of using my seat that I feel like have actually benefited my lead changes, my horsemanship, my body control on her for all the other things. So you may see me in the pleasure pin this year just because I do think it's good to push yourself to do different things. And once I go in that pleasure pin, maybe I'll have a little more advice of staying present on your horse through that whole class. But my goal for me when I do go to show in that class is to be just present and tell myself, ride every stride. And I'm going to visualize my transitions. I'm going to visualize my placement in the arena. I'm going to visualize the way that I sit on her and her legs moving underneath me. And I'm definitely going to be channeling my horse trainer's voice and what he would say to me in order for me to get her to move her highest and best self.
So, Lauren and Dixie in the Sun Circuit pleasure pen, right?
Oh, let's maybe just focus on horse yoga for Sun Circuit, but maybe we'll be in the
No,
pleasure
I
pen.
have I have expectations to see you at Sun Circuit in the pleasure. Go big or
Mm,
go home.
oh, yeah, yeah, what a great place to start. Maybe I should start at Prairie Classic. That would be a better place. Well, that'll be to be determined. If it is, we'll post a video of it and you guys can see us going and doing hard things.
So, how come you have a hesitation to wanna ride and show the pleasure?
I kind of wonder a little bit if different personality types like different classes. So I'm a very type A person and I kind of like to be in control and have a plan and execute a plan. And pleasure, as we mentioned earlier, doesn't necessarily feel like I'm in as much control. I am not in control of the horses riding around me. I'm not in control of my horse quite as much because it has to be on a drape rein and you have to go slow and you have to try to maintain arena position. And I mean, I guess one could say that that's the ultimate control because you're controlling every single stride all the way around the pen. But whew, it really feels like a lot of lack of control for me compared to the other classes.
Right?
Yeah. And so I would say that's probably why I don't enjoy that class quite as much.
I feel like yeah, because so much can go wrong and you're like, "Oh, well, my horse looked at this and I couldn't pick up on my rein." And also there's not like in the horsemanship and the showmanship and the trail and the western riding, all those pattern classes, you have a specific spot in the arena where you're like, "Okay, like I'm preparing to get to this spot to stop and do my spin and then here I'm going to do my lead change." Like I totally agree. You and I definitely have that more of that personality where we like to find our spots and okay, like it's going to happen right here. The pleasure, you don't know where. You might be in a they might ask you to lope when you're behind 3 horses that you know you're a lot faster than. And you're like, "Crap, like what am I going to do?" Or, they might ask you to jog and your horse just tripped when you're going around the corner. Like you don't have control over when they're going to ask you to change gait and you like you said, you don't have control over what everybody else is doing in the pen. And that I think is why it's so hard for me also is because I don't feel like I have near as much control. And I like to have the control. I don't like to leave it in the hands of others.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll have to talk to some pleasure people who are really into it and love it and kind of see what their mentality is because maybe they are type A also and they've just found a better way to channel it. I That's a really good point. I'd love to dive into that more.
I'm pretty sure all horse people are type A. Or not all. I'm pretty sure most horse people are type A.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a good point. We should bring someone on who can play devil's advocate and be like, "No, like this is why the pleasure requires the most mental focus." And we can be like, "No, but the horsemanship." Yeah, good idea.
Exactly. Perfect. We'll have a focused debate in the future. Thank you for listening to Elevate Your Ride. Find us on Instagram and Facebook, all linked in the podcast notes. We'll see you next time. The information provided by Elevate Your Ride is for educational and informational purposes only and is not intended as medical or professional advice. While we discuss health and fitness topics related to equestrians, the content provided through this podcast is not a substitute for professional advice. The views expressed by the host and guests on Elevate Your Ride are their own and should not be taken as professional guidance. We strive to provide accurate and up to date information, but we cannot guarantee that the information will be applicable to every individual listener or that it reflects the most current research or guidelines. Before making any changes to your health and fitness routine, we strongly recommend consulting with a qualified professional who can provide personalized advice based on your individual needs and circumstances. Elevate Your Ride and its creators will not be liable for any direct, indirect, consequential, special, exemplary, or other damages arising from the use of information on this podcast. Thank you for listening to Elevate Your Ride. We are committed to providing high quality content and appreciate your trust in us as a source of information for your health and fitness journey.